The husband signed the separation papers mockingly, but trembled when he heard her grandmother's will. Richard Thompson laughed loudly as he signed the divorce papers with an expensive gold pen, making a point to show his contempt for his wife, 20 years his junior, seated beside him. At 52, the businessman felt invincible in that law office in downtown Manhattan, certain he would leave without losing a single cent. That's when Amanda opened a worn leather folder she had brought with her and placed it on the polished mahogany table. The yellow document she pulled out made Richard let out an even louder laugh, echoing off the walls lined with law books. "Attorney Charles, are you trying to impress me with old papers?" said Richard, adjusting his Italian tie while looking disdainfully at his wife. "Let me guess. Is it some grandma's recipe?" Amanda remained silent, her dark eyes fixed on the papers she had just arranged on the table. Her hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. It was the emotion of finally being able to get justice after 10 long years of marriage. Attorney Charles Miller, a 65-year-old experienced lawyer, adjusted his glasses and picked up the first document with curiosity. His expression changed completely when he began reading the first lines. "Mrs. Amanda, this document," the lawyer began, but was interrupted by another mocking laugh from Richard. "What is it, attorney? Did the little princess bring the housekeeper's will?" Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Look, I already told you, Amanda, no prenup is going to save you. You're leaving here the same way you came into my life, with nothing." Attorney Charles continued reading, his expression growing more and more serious. He looked up at Amanda, who just nodded silently, as if giving him permission to continue. "Mr. Richard," said the attorney, clearing his throat, "this is indeed a will. A will registered 43 years ago, from Mrs. Henrietta Parker Williams." "So what?" Richard was beginning to get impatient. "What does her family's housekeeper have to do with our divorce?" "Mrs. Henrietta was the owner of a 12-hectare plot of land on the west side of New York," continued Attorney Charles, his voice growing firmer. "A plot of land that, according to this document, was passed down to her granddaughter, Mrs. Amanda Parker Thompson." Richard stopped laughing. For the first time since they had arrived at the office, he paid attention to what was being said. "Attorney, I need you to be more specific about the location of this land," requested Amanda, speaking for the first time since they had sat down. Attorney Charles turned the page and began reading the coordinates and detailed description of the property. With each word, Richard grew paler. "The land is on Olive Street, at the corner of Industrial Avenue in the Hope Village neighborhood," said the attorney. "According to the survey attached to the will, it's exactly 120,000 square meters." Richard swallowed hard. That address was exactly where the 3 commercial buildings housing his company, the merchandise warehouse, and the small factory he had built over the last 15 years were located. This can't be right," stammered Richard, snatching the papers from the attorney's hands. "I bought that land from Mr. Anthony Foster in 1995. I have the deed." Amanda opened another folder she had brought and pulled out a stack of carefully organized documents. "My grandmother never sold that land to anyone," she said, her calm voice contrasting with her husband's growing desperation. "In fact, she spent the last 20 years of her life trying to prove she was cheated." "Cheated how?" Attorney Charles leaned forward, interested. "Mr. Anthony Foster was your grandfather's partner, wasn't he, Richard?" Amanda looked directly at her husband. "Gerald Thompson." Richard remained silent, but the expression on his face was confirmation enough. "My grandmother worked in the Thompson family home for 15 years, Amanda continued. "She took care of you when you were a child, Richard. Do you remember her?" The memories began to return. Richard vaguely remembered a black lady, always smiling, who made the best chocolate truffles he had ever tasted. Ms. Henrietta. She called him Little Richie and was always patient with his mischief. She was very good to me," murmured Richard, as if talking to himself. "She was," Amanda confirmed. "That's why it hurt so much when she discovered she had been betrayed by the family she considered her own." Attorney Charles continued examining the documents. There were birth certificates, property tax payment receipts, and even old photographs. "Mrs. Amanda, these documents appear to be authentic," said the attorney. And if what is described here is true, it means that Mr. Richard's entire business complex was built on land that legally belongs to you. That's impossible. Richard stood up abruptly, making his chair screech against the wooden floor. My grandfather would never do such a thing. Amanda took a handwritten letter from the folder, the writing shaky but still legible. This is a letter my grandmother wrote to me 2 months before she passed away, she said, handing the paper to Attorney Charles. It tells the whole story. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The attorney began to read the letter aloud, his voice echoing in the tense silence of the office. My dear granddaughter Amanda, if you are reading this letter, it means the time has come to seek justice. For 15 years, I worked in the Thompson home with dedication and affection. I treated the boy Richard as if he were my own grandson. But in 1980, when Mr. Gerald needed money to expand the business, he came to me with a proposal. Richard slowly sat down, as if his legs could no longer support him. He knew I was the owner of the lands I inherited from my father, and he offered me a partnership in the business. He said I would invest with the land, and he with the money. We would be partners. I signed the papers trusting him, because I had worked in his house for 15 years, and he had always been kind to me. Continue, attorney, Amanda requested, seeing that Richard had fallen completely silent. I only found out years later that the papers I signed were not for a partnership. They were for a sale. Mr. Gerald had forged my signature on several documents and transferred the property to his name for a paltry sum. When I found out, I tried to fight it in court, but I was a black woman, a domestic worker, with no means to hire good lawyers. Attorney Charles paused, looking at Richard with a mixture of pity and indignation. I lost my job at the Thompson house when I tried to question what had happened. I spent the last 20 years of my life gathering documents, saving receipts, proving that those lands were always mine. Everything is in this folder I leave for you, my granddaughter. There's more, Amanda said when the attorney seemed to have finished. My dear, I hold no grudge against the Thompson family. The boy Richard was always sweet to me, but justice must be done. The lands are rightfully yours. Use them with wisdom and kindness. May God bless your decisions. With love, Grandma Henrietta. The silence in the office was deafening. Richard had his hands covering his face, his shoulders trembling slightly. I didn't know, he murmured. My grandfather never told me how he got that land. But you knew my grandmother had worked in your family's house, said Amanda. In 10 years of marriage, you never asked me her maiden name. You never wanted to know about my family. Richard lifted his face, his eyes were red. Parker, your name is Amanda Parker Thompson, Henrietta Parker. Williams, she completed. Parker was her maiden name. She married my grandfather, Peter Williams, when she was 18. Attorney Charles was organizing the documents, separating certificates, deeds, and proofs. Mr. Richard, I need to be very clear about the legal situation, said the attorney. If these documents are validated and everything indicates they are authentic, it means your company is located on land that legally belongs to your wife. Ex-wife, Richard corrected automatically, but his voice came out weak. Actually, said Amanda, opening another envelope, we're not done with the surprises yet. She pulled out a more recent document, stamped and signed. This is a power of attorney my grandmother signed 6 months before she passed. She gave me the authority to represent her in any legal matter related to the lands. Attorney Charles examined the document. And was this power of attorney registered with a notary public? Yes, confirmed Amanda. Since 2019, 2 years before Grandma passed away. Richard looked at his wife as if he was seeing her for the first time. Why did you never tell me about this? Because I wanted to be sure, answered Amanda. I wanted to gather all the evidence, validate all the documents, talk to notary offices, confirm every detail. I couldn't risk being wrong. And all this time you stayed married to me knowing that your family had stolen from my family, she completed. Yes, Richard. 10 years investigating, gathering papers, confirming facts. Attorney Charles stood up and went to the file cabinet, taking out some law books. I need to consult the specific legislation regarding this type of situation, he said. But prima facie, that is, at first glance, the documents presented by Ms. Amanda seemed to constitute sufficient proof of ownership. Richard was silent for a long moment, processing everything he had discovered. What do you want from me? He asked finally. Justice, Amanda answered simply. But what kind of justice? Do you want to destroy me? Do you want me to lose everything? Amanda stood up and went to the office window, watching the city movement below. You know what was the hardest part of these 10 years, Richard, she said without turning around. It wasn't gathering the documents. It wasn't proving my grandmother was right. The hardest part was discovering what kind of person I had married. What do you mean? Do you remember the day we met? She turned to face him. I was working as a receptionist at the medical clinic. You came there nervous because your father's test results had come back abnormal. Richard nodded slowly. You were crying in the hallway, Amanda continued. You said you were afraid of losing the last relative you still had, that after your mother died, your father was everything you had in the world. I remember, murmured Richard. That day I saw a sensitive, vulnerable human man. It was that man I fell in love with. And what changed? The money changed you, said Amanda, sitting back down. After you inherited your father's business, you became a different person. Arrogant, cruel, disrespectful. Attorney Charles had returned to the table with several legal codes open. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, but I need to clarify some legal matters, Ms. Amanda, do you intend to claim the property immediately? I want to understand exactly what my rights are, she replied. Well, considering the land belongs to you by hereditary right, you have several options. You can claim immediate possession, you can demand back rent for the improper use of the land, or you can negotiate some kind of agreement. Richard became slightly more animated at the mention of an agreement. Amanda, we can talk about this, he said. I can compensate you financially, I can... How much are you offering me? She interrupted. How much do you want? It's not about money, Richard. Then what is it about? Amanda took a deep breath before answering. It's about dignity, it's about respect. It's about justice for a woman who spent 20 years trying to prove she was cheated and never could because she didn't have the resources to fight against a rich and powerful family. Richard's phone rang. He looked at the screen and saw it was Monica, his secretary. I need to take this, he said, raising the device. Monica? Mr. Richard, the secretary's voice was altered. I need to speak with you urgently. I'm busy right now. Sir, it's about the company. There are several people here wanting to speak with you. They say it's about property deeds for the land. Richard turned pale. What do you mean? Some men arrived here saying they represent the true owner of the land where our company is located. They brought a court officer. Richard looked at Amanda, who was watching him calmly. Did you already file a lawsuit? He asked, hanging up the phone. It wasn't a lawsuit, she said. It was an extrajudicial notification, so you have official knowledge of the situation. Attorney Charles consulted his papers again. The extrajudicial notification is a standard procedure, he explained. It serves to formalize that the real owner of the land is aware of the irregular occupation. Irregular? Richard became agitated. I've been paying taxes on that land for 20 years. Paying taxes in whose name? Asked Amanda. In the name of... Richard stopped mid-sentence, realizing where she was going with this. Of Thompson Enterprises, LLC, she completed. The company your grandfather founded with stolen land. Attorney Charles leafed through some documents. Mr. Richard, may I ask a question? Do you have the original deed for the land? I do. It's in the company safe. And whose name is listed as the seller? Anthony Foster. Who coincidentally was your grandfather's partner, said Amanda, and who was never the legitimate owner of the land. Richard was beginning to understand the magnitude of the situation. So you're saying my entire company was built on stolen land? Not stolen, corrected Attorney Charles. Obtained through fraudulent documentation. Technically, it's qualified embezzlement. Richard's phone rang again. This time it was Charles, his minority partner. Richard, what's happening? Charles's voice was agitated. A subpoena arrived here at my house about the company's land. Charles, I'll explain later. Explain what? That our company was built on stolen land. that I could be sued for receiving stolen property. Richard, my family is going to be dragged into a legal battle because of you. Charles, calm down. Calm down nothing. I'm leaving the partnership today. I don't want my name linked to this mess. Charles hung up on Richard. It seems the news has spread quickly, observed Attorney Charles. The phone rang for the third time. It was another partner, then another, then another. Within 15 minutes, Richard had received 5 calls from people wanting to dissociate from the company immediately. My entire life is falling apart, he said, putting his hands on his head. Now you know how my grandmother felt when she discovered she had been cheated, said Amanda. But I didn't know. I wasn't a part of this. But you benefited from it for 20 years. And what do you want me to do? That I give back the time? That I resurrect your grandmother to ask for forgiveness? Amanda was silent for a moment. I want you to understand what she went through, he finally said. I want you to feel in your own skin what it's like to have your life turned upside down by an injustice. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us creators who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. Attorney Charles interrupted the tense moment. I need to do some legal research, he said. I'll verify the validity of all these documents with the appropriate registries. This might take a few days. A few days? Richard became agitated. Attorney, my company is collapsing. I can't wait a few days. Mr. Richard, land ownership issues aren't resolved overnight, replied the lawyer, especially when they involve documents from several decades ago. Amanda stood up and started gathering her papers. Where are you going? Asked Richard. Home, she replied simply. Our home. My home, she corrected him. The apartment was bought in my name, remember? You said it was better that way for tax reasons. Richard had completely forgotten about that detail. 3 years ago, on the accountant's suggestion, they had bought the luxury apartment on the Upper East Side in Amanda's name to optimize taxes. You can't just leave me here like this, he said. I need to talk to you. I need to understand what's happening. You had 10 years to understand who I was, Amanda replied. You were never interested. But now it's different. Now you need me. She finished his sentence. It really is different. Attorney Charles stood up, indicating the meeting was over. I'll contact you as soon as I have more information, he said. I suggest you don't make any hasty decisions until then. Richard stood frozen in the middle of the office as Amanda walked to the door. Amanda, he called out. I never meant to hurt you. She stopped with her hand on the doorknob. You never meant to hurt me, she repeated. But you also never cared if I was being hurt. What's the difference? The difference, she said, turning to face him, is that one is intentional cruelty and the other is indifference. They both hurt, but indifference hurts more. Why does it hurt more? Because it means I was never important enough for you to even notice if I was suffering. Amanda left the office, leaving Richard alone with Attorney Charles. Attorney, said Richard, you need to tell me honestly, what are the chances of me keeping my company? The lawyer sighed. Mr. Richard, if the documents presented by your wife are validated, you have 2 options. Buy the land at the current market value or vacate it. And what is the current market value? A plot of land of 120,000 square meters on the west side of New York City, zoned for commercial use with all the permits, I'd say between $15 and $20 million. Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. I don't have that kind of money, he murmured. Then you will have to vacate. And where will I rebuild everything? How will I keep the employees? How will I honor the contracts? Those are questions you will have to answer, said Attorney Charles. But first, let's confirm the authenticity of the documents. Richard left the law office completely stunned. The city of New York seemed different. The traffic was louder, people walked faster. Everything seemed hostile. He got in his car and drove to the company. But when he arrived, he found a scene of chaos. There were several people in the reception area, employees talking in groups, a palpable tension in the air. Monica, his secretary of 12 years, came rushing to meet him. Mr. Richard, thank goodness you're here, she said. The suppliers are cancelling contracts. The bank called wanting an urgent meeting, and there are a bunch of lawyers wanting to speak with you. What lawyers? Representatives of the other tenants in the building. It seems everyone received a notification about the land issue. Richard went up to his office on the top floor, but he had barely sat down when the phone rang. It was Robert, his financial manager. "Richard, we need to talk," said Robert. "The company's numbers are in free fall. 3 clients have already cancelled contracts just this morning." "Because of the land issue?" "Because of the legal uncertainty. No one wants to do business with a company that might not have a place to operate." "Robert, this is temporary. We'll sort everything out." "How? Do you have 15 million to buy the land?" Richard fell silent. "That's what I thought," said Robert. "I'm going to start looking for another job." "Robert, you can't abandon me now." "It's not abandonment, Richard. It's survival. I have a family to support." Robert hung up, leaving Richard alone in his office. For the first time in 20 years, he felt completely lost. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Richard," said Monica, "there's a lady downstairs wanting to speak with you. She says it's about the land issue." "What lady?" "Ms. Catherine Parker. She says she is Mrs. Amanda's aunt." Richard froze. Another family member, another person he would have to face. "Send her up," he said, resigned. A few minutes later, a lady of about 70 years old entered his office. She had grey hair tied in a bun, wore a simple but clean dress, and carried a worn leather bag. "Good afternoon, Mr. Richard," she said, with a firm but polite voice. "I am Catherine Parker, sister of Henrietta." Richard automatically stood up, raised as he was to respect his elders. "Please have a seat," he said, indicating a chair. "Thank you," said Miss Catherine, seating herself with dignity. "I've come to talk with you," she said, "person to person, human being to human being." Richard waited in silence. "My sister, Henrietta, told me many stories about the Thompson family," continued Miss Catherine. "She said you were a sweet, polite boy, that you liked to play in the backyard, and would ask her to make Brigadeiro fudge for you." "I remember your sister," said Richard. "She was very good to me." "She was good to all of us," said Miss Catherine. "Even after discovering she had been deceived by your grandfather, she never spoke ill of the family. She said it wasn't the children's fault." "Miss Catherine, I didn't know anything about this until today." "I believe you didn't know," she said. "But now that you do know, what do you intend to do?" "I don't know," admitted Richard. "I'm still trying to understand everything." Miss Catherine opened her bag and took out an old photograph. "This photo was taken at my daughter's 15th birthday party," she said, showing him the picture. "It's from 1985. Do you see this tiny house in the background?" Richard looked at the photo. It was a simple house with 2 bedrooms and a small backyard. "I see it," he said. "This was the house my sister built on the land she inherited from our father," said Miss Catherine. "She sold 2 small lots to get the money to build this little house. It was where she dreamed of spending the rest of her life." "What happened to the house?" "When she discovered that the papers she signed weren't partnership agreements but sale deeds, it was already too late. Your grandfather had already torn down the house and started building the warehouse." Richard swallowed hard. "My sister cried for days," continued Miss Catherine. "It wasn't just the house. It was the backyard where she planted herbs. It was the grapevine our father had planted. It was the memories of an entire lifetime." "Miss Catherine, I'm so sorry." "You don't need to be sorry for your family," she interrupted. "You need to be sorry for what you will do from now on." "What do you mean?" "My niece Amanda is not a vengeful person," said Miss Catherine. "She could have revealed all this years ago. She could have sued you. She could have destroyed your company in a much worse way." "So why did she reveal it now?" "Because she waited for you to become the person she believed you could be," answered Miss Catherine. "And when she realized you were heading in the opposite direction, she decided to act." "What opposite direction?" "Your grandfather's side," she said, looking directly into Richard's eyes. "Arrogant, disrespectful, thinking you can walk all over people because you have money." Miss Catherine's words were like a slap in the face to Richard. "Are you saying I've become like my grandfather?" "I'm asking, what do you think?" Richard was silent for a long moment, reflecting on his behavior over the last few years. "I changed," he finally admitted. "After I inherited my father's businesses, I changed. Change can be reversed. said Miss Catherine, as long as the person truly wants to change. Do you think I can still be saved? Everyone can be saved, my son. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price. What price? The price of humility, she answered. The price of admitting mistakes, asking for forgiveness, and doing what's right, even if it costs you dearly. Miss Catherine stood up to leave. Can I give you some advice? She asked. Please, go talk to my niece, for real. Not to try to convince her of something. Not to make a deal, but to understand who she is, what she's been through, what she feels. Do you think she would listen to me? I think she's been waiting 10 years for you to show a genuine interest in who she is. Miss Catherine left the room, leaving Richard with a lot to think about. That night, Richard went to the apartment on the Upper East Side, but found the locks changed. There was a note stuck to the door. Your clothes are with the doorman, Amanda. He went down to the front desk and found 2 suitcases with his personal clothes. The doorman, Mr. Anthony, who had known the couple for 3 years, seemed embarrassed by the situation. Mr. Richard, I'm sorry, said the doorman. Miss Amanda came by earlier and left your things. Mr. Anthony, do you know where she went? No, sir. She only said she was going to stay at her aunt's house for a few days. Richard picked up the suitcases and went to a nearby hotel. In the small, impersonal room, he began to grasp the real extent of how much his life had changed in just one day. He tried to call Amanda, but the phone was off. He tried to send messages, but got no response. The next morning, he returned to the company and found an even worse situation. More suppliers had cancelled contracts. The bank had blocked an important line of credit. 3 employees had quit. Monica entered his office with a stack of papers. Mr. Richard, more notifications have arrived, she said, and there are a lot of journalists calling. Journalists? It seems the story has leaked, something about a company built on stolen land. Richard felt the world spin. If the press got involved, it would be the complete end of his reputation. The phone rang. It was Attorney Charles. Mr. Richard, I need to see you urgently, said the lawyer. I've confirmed the authenticity of all the documents presented by your wife. And that means... It means she is the legitimate owner of the land. There is no possible doubt. Richard hung up the phone and sat down heavily in his chair. It was official. His company was built on stolen land. He picked up his cell phone and dialed Catherine Parker. She had left her number when she left the room the day before. Miss Catherine, it's Richard Thompson. Hello, my son. How are you? I'm not well, he admitted. Could you give me Amanda's phone number? I need to speak to her urgently. May I ask why? Because I want to do the right thing, said Richard. But I don't know how. There was a pause on the other end of the line. She's at my place, said Miss Catherine finally. 142 Flower Street, Williamsburg, apartment 23. Do you think she would see me? There's only one way to find out. Richard left the company in the middle of the afternoon, leaving Monica with instructions to cancel all of the day's appointments. He drove to Williamsburg and found an old, simple but well-kept building. He went up to apartment 23 and rang the bell. Amanda opened the door, and he could see she had been crying. What do you want? She asked, without opening the door completely. I want to talk, said Richard. Please. About what? About everything. About your grandmother, about you, about us. Amanda hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. Miss Catherine's apartment was small but cozy. There were family photos on the walls, plants on the balcony, an old but comfortable sofa. Would you like some coffee? Asked Amanda. Yes, thank you. They sat at the kitchen table with 2 steaming cups of coffee between them. I spoke with your aunt yesterday, said Richard. She told me about the house. What house? The house your grandmother built on the land, the one my grandfather tore down. Amanda nodded silently. I didn't know, Richard continued. I swear to God I didn't know my grandfather had done that. But you knew something was wrong, said Amanda. Nobody buys 12 acres on the west side for a song without knowing something's fishy. You're right, admitted Richard. I always suspected there was something shady about how that land was acquired, but I chose not to investigate. Why did you choose not to investigate? Because it was convenient for me to believe my grandfather's version, said Richard. because it was easier to pretend I didn't know. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Amanda stirred her coffee slowly, thoughtfully. Do you want to know what hurts me the most in this whole story? She asked. I do. It's not even the land. It's not even the money. It's the fact that my grandmother spent the last 20 years of her life being treated like a liar. What do you mean? Every time she tried to tell someone what had happened, people thought it was an old woman's fantasy. A housekeeper saying she was robbed by a wealthy family. Who would believe that? Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Even her own children started to doubt her, Amanda continued. My uncles thought she was making up stories. Only I believed her. Why did you believe her? Because I knew her. My grandmother was the most honest person I have ever known in my life. She would never make up a story like that. And that's why you decided to investigate. I decided to investigate to clear her name, said Amanda. To prove she wasn't crazy, wasn't making it up, wasn't delusional. Richard was silent for a moment. And during these 10 years of investigation, you found out who I really was, and he said. No, corrected Amanda. During these 10 years, I found out who you had become. What's the difference? The difference is that I fell in love with who you were, and I spent 10 years trying to find that person again. And did you succeed? No, she said sadly. That person got lost somewhere along the way. Richard got up and went to the apartment's small balcony. The view was simple. Other low buildings, a small square, some trees. Amanda, he said without turning around, what do I need to do to find that person again? It's not me you need to talk to, she replied. It's yourself. I don't understand. Richard, you spent the last 10 years building a version of yourself based on what you thought you should be. Rich, powerful, respected. But you forgot to ask who you really were. And who am I really? That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. Richard went back to the table. And while I'm figuring out who I am, what's going to happen to the land? To my company. I'm going to get justice for my grandmother, said Amanda. This time the truth will be officially recognized. Does that mean you're going to take the land? It means the land will go back to whoever was always the legitimate owner. And what are you going to do with it? Amanda smiled for the first time since they had sat down to talk. I'm going to build affordable housing, she said. 12 hectares is enough to build about 200 small houses. For low-income families who never had the chance to own a home. Richard was genuinely surprised. You're not going to make any money from this? No, she replied simply. I'm going to fulfill my grandmother's dream. She always said that if she ever got the land back, she would do something good for the community. And my company? Your company will have to find another place to operate. Amanda, if you do this, I'll go bankrupt. Hundreds of employees will lose their jobs. Dozens of families will be left with no support. I know, she said, and Richard could see that this genuinely bothered her. So why don't we find a solution that doesn't hurt so many innocent people? What kind of solution? I don't know, Richard admitted, but there must be something we can do. Amanda was thoughtful for a few minutes. Richard, can I ask you a question? Go ahead. If you could start your life over from scratch, what would you do differently? Everything, he answered without hesitation. I'd do everything differently. How? I'd be more humble. I'd be more respectful. I'd treat people like human beings, not like obstacles or opportunities. And regarding business? I'd do honest business. I'd pay fair wages. I'd care about the employees' well-being. And regarding us? Richard looked into Amanda's eyes. I'd treat you the way you deserve to be treated. I'd listen when you spoke. I'd be interested in your life, your family, your dreams. Why didn't you do that before? Because I thought you were with me for my money, Richard admitted. I thought all women only got close to me because of the money. And now that you know I had money all along? Now I know that I lost the only person who really loved me for who I was. Amanda got up and went to the bedroom, returning a few minutes later with a folder. What's that? Asked Richard. These are the plans I made for the land, she said, opening the folder. House blueprints, construction schedule, budgets. Richard examined the papers. It was an impressive project. 200 small but well-designed houses with green areas, a school, a health clinic, a sports court. "You've thought of everything," he said admiringly. "I've worked on this for 2 years," said Amanda, "ever since I was sure I was going to get the land back. And how much will it cost?" "About 12 million reais. I'm going to use part of the compensation I intend to claim for the improper use of the land all these years." Richard calculated mentally. 12 million was exactly the amount Attorney Charles had estimated for buying the land. "Amanda," he said slowly, "what if I proposed a partnership to you?" "What do you mean?" "What if, instead of you compensating me and me paying you for the land, we pooled that money and built this project together?" Amanda looked at him suspiciously. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do," replied Richard, "and because maybe it's the only way for me to find myself again." "And your company?" "I'm going to change the company's focus. Instead of building commercial buildings for rich businessmen, we're going to build affordable housing. You understand this will mean much less profit?" "I understand, but maybe it will mean much more purpose." Amanda closed the folder and looked him directly in the eyes. "Richard, I can't make this decision based on promises. I've heard too many promises from you already. What do you need to believe in me?" "I need to see actions," she said. "Not words. Actions." "What kind of actions?" "Start by treating your employees with dignity. Stop yelling at people. Stop thinking you can humiliate others just because you pay their salary." "Anything else?" "Find the former employees you fired unfairly and apologize to them." "Is there more?" "Tame your arrogance. Learn to listen. Stop always needing to be right." Richard nodded silently. "And there's one more important thing," Amanda continued. "What?" "Go visit my grandmother's grave and ask for her forgiveness." Richard felt a shiver. "Even though she's no longer here?" "Especially because she's no longer here," said Amanda. "She passed away without seeing justice done. The least you can do is acknowledge the harm your family caused her. Would you take me there? If you are truly willing to change, yes." Richard extended his hand to Amanda. "Will you give me a chance? One last chance?" Amanda looked at the outstretched hand for a long moment. "One chance," she said finally, shaking his hand. "But it really is the last one." In the following days, Richard began to put into practice the changes he had promised. He started by calling all the company's employees to a meeting. "Everyone," he said, standing before the 50 employees gathered in the company's auditorium, "you must be worried about the news that's been circulating about our situation." Murmurs spread through the room. "I want to be completely transparent with you," Richard continued. "It's true that our company was built on land that didn't legally belong to us. It's true that we will have to leave this location." The murmurs grew louder. "But I want to reassure you, no one will lose their job because of this. We will find a new location and we will continue working." Monica, who was in the front row, raised her hand. "Mr. Richard, may I ask a question?" "Go ahead, Monica. And everyone, from now on, you don't need to call me Mr. anymore. Just call me Richard." Monica smiled. "How are we going to manage to start over? Will there be money for it?" "There will be," replied Richard. "But it will be different. Instead of building commercial buildings, we're going to start working on affordable housing." Robert, the financial manager who had threatened to leave the company, also raised his hand. "Richard, affordable housing is less profitable. How are we going to maintain salaries?" "Salaries will be maintained," Richard assured. "I will reduce my own draw from the company to make up the difference." The room fell silent. In 20 years with the company, Richard had never given up a single cent of his profit. "There's one more thing," he continued. "I want to apologize to all of you for my inappropriate behavior over the years. I know I was often rude, disrespectful, too authoritarian." Ms. Martha, a 60-year-old woman who worked in cleaning, began to cry. "Ms. Martha, are you all right?" asked Richard, concerned. "I am," she said, drying her tears. "It's just that in 40 years of work, I've never heard a boss apologize to the employees." "Well, it's the first of many changes you're going to see," said Richard. "And if anyone has any suggestions on how we can improve the work environment, I want to hear them. Charlie, a 25-year-old young man who worked in the stockroom, timidly raised his hand. Go ahead, Charlie. Richard, would it be possible to have a better meal voucher? Because 50 rays a month isn't even enough to have lunch every day. You're right, said Richard. Starting next month, the meal voucher will be 200 rays. The entire room let out a surprised, "Oh!" Anything else? Asked Richard. Several hands went up. For the next 2 hours, Richard listened to suggestions, complaints, ideas, and proposals. For the first time in 20 years, he really paid attention to what his employees had to say. By the end of the meeting, he felt exhausted, but also lighter than he had felt in years. Monica approached him after everyone had left. Richard, she said, can I say something? Of course. You're different, more human. You think so? I do, and I can tell you, we all like this change. That afternoon, Richard called Attorney Charles. Attorney, I need a list of all the former employees who were fired from the company in the last 5 years. What for, Mr. Richard? I'm going to apologize to each one of them personally. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Richard, that's more than 30 people. Then I'll have plenty of work ahead of me. Over the next 10 days, Richard personally visited each of the fired former employees. Some received him with hostility, others with surprise, others with distrust. But they all heard his apologies. To some he offered re-employment, to others letters of recommendation, to everyone a sincere request for forgiveness. The most touching story was that of Samuel, a 58-year-old worker who had been fired for cause after questioning an order from Richard. Mr. Samuel, Richard said, in the modest living room of the former employee's house, I've come to apologize for the way I treated you. You don't need to apologize, boss, said Samuel, visibly uncomfortable. It's in the past. Yes, I do. I fired you because my ego was hurt, not because you did anything wrong. And that was unfair. Do you want me to come back to work? Only if you want to. But regardless, I wanted you to know that I recognize I was wrong. Samuel was silent for a moment. Boss, can I ask a question? Go ahead. Why did you change? Because I discovered that the person I had become wasn't the person I wanted to be. And what kind of person do you want to be? A better person, Richard replied. Someone who treats others with dignity and respect. Samuel smiled. If that's the case, then I accept coming back. But only if it's the way you are now, not the way you were before. Deal. On the Friday of the second week, Richard picked up Amanda to go visit Miss Henrietta's grave. The Greenwood Cemetery was located on the north side of the city, far from the upscale neighborhoods Richard was used to frequenting. Miss Henrietta's grave was simple. A grey granite headstone with her name, the dates of birth and death, and the inscription, Dedicated Mother, Beloved Grandmother. She's been here for 4 years, said Amanda, placing an arrangement of white flowers in front of the headstone. Richard stood before the grave, not knowing what to say. You can speak, said Amanda. She's listening. Miss Henrietta, Richard began, feeling a little ridiculous. I've come to ask for forgiveness on behalf of my family, for what my grandfather did to you. The wind rustled the leaves of a nearby tree, as if in response. I know I can't undo the wrong that was done, Richard continued, but I promise I will try to do good from now on. I will help build the houses you dreamed of building. Amanda was crying silently beside him. And I also promise that I will take good care of your granddaughter, said Richard. If she gives me a chance, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the time I lost being an idiot. They stood in silence before the grave for a few minutes. Do you think she forgave me? Richard asked as they were leaving the cemetery. My grandmother always had a big heart, Amanda replied. I'm sure she forgave you. And you? He asked. Do you forgive me? Amanda stopped walking and looked him in the eyes. I'm trying, she said. But forgiveness is a process, not a moment. How long could this legal process take? I don't know, admitted Amanda. It depends on you continuing to prove you've really changed. 2 weeks later, Richard found the perfect place to rebuild his company, a spacious warehouse on the east side of the city, much more modest than the previous complex, but sufficient for his needs. That same day, he and Amanda met with attorney Charles to finalize the legal details of the partnership. "So you want to create a construction company focused on affordable housing?" asked the attorney. "That's right," confirmed Amanda. 50% for each partner, profits split equally, decisions made together. "And the land in Hope Village?" "It will be donated to a foundation that will build the affordable houses," said Richard. "We won't profit from it at all." Attorney Charles adjusted his glasses. "Are you sure about this? That's 12 million Rs worth of land." "We're sure," said Amanda. "It's what my grandmother would have wanted done." "And will you manage the construction of the houses?" "Yes," said Richard. "It will be our first project as a new company." Attorney Charles prepared all the documents, and the following week, Parker and Thompson Construction was officially established. The new company's first office was in a small room downtown. Richard, accustomed to the luxury of the previous complex, had to adjust to a simple desk, a basic computer, and a receptionist shared with other businesses in the building. "It's very different from what you were used to," observed Amanda on the first day of operation. "It is," agreed Richard, "but it's better." "Why is it better?" "Because now I know I'm building something that has meaning," he replied. "Before, I built to feed my ego. Now I'm building to help people have a home." The first project of 200 affordable houses began 3 months later. Richard insisted on personally overseeing every stage of the construction. He would arrive at the construction site at 6 in the morning and only leave when it got dark. He talked with the bricklayers, helped carry materials, sweated alongside the workers. "Boss, you don't need to do the heavy lifting," said Michael, an experienced foreman. "We have employees for that." "Michael, I'm not anyone's boss anymore," replied Richard, wiping the sweat from his face with a towel. "We're all colleagues here." "What do you mean?" "Just that. Everyone working together to build houses for families in need. There's no boss and employees. There are people working toward the same goal." Michael smiled. "I like that colleague, Richard." Amanda watched the construction progress with emotion. She had created a detailed schedule. The first 50 houses would be ready in 6 months, the next 50 in another 4 months, and so on, until all 200 were complete. Each house was small, 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen and bathroom, but well built with quality finishes. "We're not going to cut corners on materials," Richard told his team. "These families deserve good houses, not cheap ones." "But that will reduce our profit margin," observed Robert, who had remained as the financial manager. "Robert, our profit margin on this project is 0, Richard reminded him. "We're doing this to fulfill a dream, not to make money." "Oh, right, I forgot," said Robert, laughing. "I'm still getting used to the new Richard." 6 months later, the first 50 houses were ready. Richard and Amanda organized a key handover ceremony for the selected families. It was a sunny Saturday when 50 families gathered on the Hope Village land to receive the keys to their new homes. Ms. Mary, a 62-year-old widow who had spent her entire life paying rent, cried when she received the key to house number 1. "I can't believe this house is mine," she said, hugging the key as if it were a treasure. "It's yours, Miss Mary," confirmed Amanda, "forever." "But how come I don't have to pay anything?" "Because a very special person dreamed of doing this," explained Amanda. "My grandmother always said that everyone deserves a place to call home." Mr. Jacob, a 58-year-old retiree who lived in a wooden shack with his wife and 3 grandchildren, couldn't say anything when he received the key to house number 25. He just hugged Richard and cried. "Thank you, my son," he murmured. "May God bless you." Richard was also emotional. "May God bless you and your family, Mr. Jacob." In the late afternoon, when all 50 families had received their keys and were exploring their new homes, Richard and Amanda walked through the small village they had created. Children ran through the backyards, women chatted on the porches, men discussed where they would plant their gardens. Miss Henrietta's dream was coming true. "Your grandmother would be proud," said Richard. "She would," agreed Amanda. "She always said that true happiness comes from doing good for other people." "She was right," said Richard. "I've never felt so fulfilled in my life." They stopped in front of a small garden that Amanda had planned in the center of the village. There was a concrete bench under a young tree. "Amanda," said Richard, "can I ask you a question?" "Go ahead." "Do you think we'll ever be able to start over? You and me?" Amanda sat on the bench and looked at the houses around them. "I don't know if we can start over," she said, "but I think we can start something new." "Something new like?" "A relationship based on respect, honesty, a true partnership. No lies, no arrogance, no disrespect." "Exactly." Richard sat down beside her. "Are you willing to try?" "I am," said Amanda, smiling. "But slowly. Step by step." Agreed. They sat on the bench, watching the families settling into their new homes until the sun had set completely. 2 years later, the 200 houses were ready and occupied. What had started as an affordable housing project had turned into a small town. There was a school, a health clinic, a sports court, an ecumenical chapel, and even a small library. Richard and Amanda had become a national reference in social housing. They were invited to give lectures at universities, consulted by city halls across the country, and approached by other companies that wanted to replicate their model. Parker and Thompson Construction had grown and now employed 200 people. But Richard maintained the principles he had learned: fair wages, a respectful work environment, profit sharing for all employees. Alongside the social housing projects, they also did some commercial projects to maintain the company's financial sustainability, but always with the commitment that a portion of the profits would be reinvested in social projects. On the 3rd anniversary of the first house handover, they organized a big party in Hope Village. There was music, food, games for the children, and lots of joy. Ms. Mary, who had been the first resident, approached Richard in the late afternoon. "Can I say something?" she asked. Of course, Miss Mary. You and Ms. Amanda changed everyone's life here. My grandchildren are studying in a good school. I have a health clinic close to home, and for the first time in my life, I don't have to worry about eviction." "That's wonderful, Miss Mary. I'm very happy to hear that. But do you know what makes me happiest?" "What?" "It's seeing that you two have become happier too. In the beginning, Miss Amanda was always sad, and you seemed like a bitter person. Now you both shine." Richard looked at Amanda, who was playing with a group of children near the sports court. She really did seem happier, lighter. "You're right, Miss Mary. We really are happier." "And when are you two going to make it official?" "Make what official?" "Why, everyone here knows you're a couple," said Miss Mary, laughing. "You just need to make it official." Richard blushed. "Miss Mary, our situation is complicated." "Complicated nothing," she interrupted. "True love isn't complicated. It's just laziness about making a commitment." That night, as they were driving home, Richard brought up the subject. "Amanda, Miss Mary asked me when we're going to make our situation official." "What situation?" asked Amanda, pretending not to understand. "You know what situation." They were driving through the city, passing neighborhoods they knew well after 3 years working in affordable housing. "Richard," said Amanda, "can I be honest with you?" "Of course." "I'm still afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that you'll go back to being the person you were before." Richard pulled the car over at a gas station and turned to her. "Amanda, look at me." She looked into his eyes. "I'm not that person anymore," he said. "And I never will be again. Not because I'm pretending, but because I discovered that person made me unhappy." "How can I be sure of that?" "Because you've seen me every day for 3 years. You work with me, you live with me, you know me better than I know myself." "That's true," admitted Amanda. "And deep down, you know I've really changed, don't you?" "I do," she said, smiling. "But admitting that would mean having to make a decision." "What decision?" "The decision to trust you again, completely." Richard took Amanda's hands in his. "And can you trust me again?" "I want to," she said, "but I need a little more time." "How much time?" "I don't know. As long as it takes for me to be sure I won't regret it." "What if I told you I can no longer imagine my life without you?" "What if I told you I can no longer imagine my life without you either?" But that scares me. Why does it scare you? Because the last time I trusted you completely, you broke my heart. Richard was silent for a moment. Amanda, I can't promise I'll never make mistakes again, he said finally. But I can promise I will never intentionally hurt you again, and that I will never let pride speak louder than love, and that I will never treat you with disrespect, and that I will never value money more than people. Amanda looked at him silently, her eyes glistening. And I can promise one more thing, Richard continued. What? That if you give me another chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve it. Amanda leaned over and kissed Richard softly on the lips. Okay, she murmured. Let's try again. Really? Really? 6 months later, Richard and Amanda were married in a simple ceremony at the Ecumenical Chapel in Hope Village. All the villagers were invited, all the company employees were present, and Miss Catherine cried with emotion seeing her niece happy again. The priest who celebrated the ceremony made a point of mentioning Miss Henrietta in his homily. This union is also a tribute to a woman who is no longer with us, but whose dream became reality through love and justice, he said. Ms. Henrietta Parker Williams, who always believed it was possible to do good in this world. After the ceremony, there was a big party in the center of the village. There was live music, food prepared by the villagers themselves, and a contagious joy in the air. Mr. Jacob, who had been one of the first residents, gave an emotional speech. When I received the key to my house 3 years ago, I thought the greatest gift you could give me was a roof for my family, he said. But over time I discovered that you gave me something much greater. Dignity. The audience applauded. Here in this place, nobody is treated as a poor soul. Everyone is treated with respect. The children grow up knowing they can dream big. The adults work with dignity. The elderly are cared for with affection. The applause grew more intense. You didn't just build houses, continued Mr. Jacob. You built hope. At the end of the party, when it was already getting dark and the last guests were leaving, Richard and Amanda walked to the symbolic tomb they had built for Miss Henrietta in the center of the village. It was a small circular garden with a bronze plaque that read, "In memory of Henrietta Parker Williams, a warrior woman, a dedicated grandmother, a tireless dreamer. Her dream became reality." "Thank you, Grandma," murmured Amanda, placing white flowers in the garden. "Thank you for teaching me what really matters in life," added Richard. They stood in silence for a few minutes, holding hands, contemplating the village they had created together. "You know what's the most amazing thing?" said Amanda. "What?" 3 years ago, when I revealed the truth about the land, my goal was to get justice for my grandmother. I never imagined it would result in all this. All this what? In this place full of life and joy. In this company that employs 200 families. In this love that we rebuilt. In this lesson that the truth always wins in the end. And that it's never too late to change. Richard hugged Amanda and looked around. There were children playing in the streets, adults talking on their porches, elderly people playing dominoes in the square. There was life, there was community, there was love. "Amanda," he said, "can I tell you a secret?" "You can. I'm happier now, with much less money than I was before when I thought I had everything." "Why do you think that is?" "Because before I had things," answered Richard. "Now I have purpose." 5 years after the episode that changed their lives, Richard and Amanda had become one of the most respected couples in the country's social housing sector. Parker and Thompson Construction had built over 1,000 affordable homes in various cities across the state of New York. They had 2 children, Jacob, age 3, and Henrietta, age 1, who was named after the great-grandmother she never knew, but whose legacy she would always carry. Richard had become a sought-after speaker, telling his story of personal and business transformation, but he always made a point of making it clear that the real credit belonged to Amanda and Ms. Henrietta. "I didn't change because I'm a special person," he would say in his speeches. "I changed because I found special people who showed me who I could be." Amanda, in turn, had become a reference in social architecture. She developed housing projects that were copied by city halls across the country. But despite all their professional success, they never lost sight of what really mattered: family, friendship, community, social justice. Every year, on the anniversary of the delivery of the first houses in Hope Village, they organized a party to celebrate not just the project, but the values it represented. At the fifth annual party, Miss Mary, who was now 67 years old and had become a respected leader in the community, gave a speech that moved everyone. "5 years ago I was given a house," she said. "Today I can say I was given much more than that. I was given a family, a community, a new life." She looked directly at Richard and Amanda. "You taught me that justice isn't revenge. Justice is transformation. You could have used the situation to get revenge, to humiliate, to destroy. But they chose to use the situation to build, to unite, to create love where there was once hurt." The audience was silent, moved. "And they taught me something even more important," continued Miss Mary. "They taught me that it's never too late to do what's right." Miss Henrietta waited 20 years to see justice be done. But when it happened in a way more beautiful than she could ever have imagined. At the end of that special night, Richard and Amanda put the children to bed and went out for a walk through the Hope Village neighborhood. The streets were quiet, lit by streetlights they themselves had installed. There was the distant sound of conversations in the houses, the noise of televisions on, the occasional cry of a baby, all the sounds of a living, thriving community. "Richard," said Amanda, stopping in front of house number 1, where Miss Mary lived, "do you remember the day we signed the divorce papers?" "I remember," he replied. "It was the worst and the best day of my life." "How could it have been the best?" "Because it was the day I started to find myself again," said Richard. "It was the day I discovered I could be a better person." "And you don't miss the old life? The money, the status, the power?" Richard looked around, seeing the simple but lively houses, remembering the happy families they had helped to house. "I don't miss anything," he said, "because I learned that true wealth isn't what you have. It's what you do with what you have." "And what did you do with what you had?" "I turned it into love," replied Richard. "And love is the only thing that grows when you share it." They reached the center of the village, where the garden in memory of Miss Henrietta was flowering and well kept. There was a new bench beside it, where the residents often sat to talk on Sunday afternoons. "Amanda," said Richard, "can I ask you a question?" "You may." "Do you think your grandmother is proud of what we've done?" Amanda smiled, looking at the stars in the clear night sky. "I'm sure she is," she said, "because we fulfilled her dream in a way even more beautiful than she imagined." "How so?" "She dreamed of achieving justice. We achieved justice with love. She dreamed of recovering her dignity. We transformed pain into hope. She dreamed of leaving a legacy. We turned her legacy into a happy family and a thriving community." Richard hugged Amanda and kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" "For giving me a second chance. For believing I could change. For showing me the way back to who I really am." "Thank you," replied Amanda, "for having the courage to change. For choosing love over pride. For building with me something much bigger than the two of us." They walked back home hand in hand, passing through streets where they had played as children, past houses where families slept peacefully, past a school where children would learn to dream big, past a health clinic where people would be cared for with dignity. It was a small corner of the world where justice had triumphed, where love had conquered resentment, where dreams had become reality. It was the legacy of Miss Henrietta Parker Williams, a simple woman who never gave up believing it was possible to do what was right, even when everyone doubted her. It was proof that the truth always finds a way, that justice may be slow but never fails, and that love is always stronger than revenge. And it was also the story of Richard Thompson, a man who lost everything he thought was important to discover everything that truly mattered, and who found in humility the path to true happiness. When they got home, Richard stopped in the backyard and looked back, contemplating the village they had created together. 200 houses, 200 families, hundreds of dreams fulfilled. "You know what moves me the most about this whole story?" he said to Amanda. "What?" It's thinking that if I hadn't changed, none of this would have happened. All these families would still be paying rent. All these children wouldn't have a good school. All these elderly people wouldn't have a health clinic nearby. And we wouldn't have found each other again, added Amanda. And I wouldn't have discovered that the greatest wealth in the world is being able to sleep in peace, knowing you've done good. They entered the house, where their 2 children slept peacefully and prepared for another night of well-deserved rest. Outside, Hope Village rested under the stars, a living monument to the power of justice, love, and second chances. And somewhere, in the midst of memories that never die, Ms. Henrietta Parker Williams smiled, knowing that her dream had become far more beautiful than she had ever imagined. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of transformation and justice. Do you believe people can really change like Richard changed? And what do you think about the way Amanda chose to seek justice, with love instead of revenge? Leave your opinion in the comments. It helps us a lot. And if you liked the story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.